Example 1, solve for x. So here's my general checklist when I want to solve multi-step equations. Number 1, I want to distribute when possible. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and circle this -2, and this is the value that I want to distribute through the parentheses. And by distributing -2 to -4x, the result is 8x. Please remember that when you multiply and divide negatives, when you have a negative times a negative or positive times a positive, when the signs are the same, it's always going to be positive. Similarly, -2 times -1 is going to give you +2. Bring down the -x, bring down the +3, bring down the equal, bring down the -30. So there's step number 1, I was able to distribute. Step number 2, I'm going to combine like terms. And I've got into the habit of circling any x terms together. So this +8x and this -x, they're actually going to combine. 8x minus x is 7x. If it helps you, you can always put the number 1 in front if it's a -x or a +x. I always leave it out because I understand that, but it's whatever you prefer. I'm going to underline 2 and 3. And 2 plus 3 is 5, so my equation would simplify to 7x plus 5 equals -30. After that, I'm going to isolate 7x by subtracting 5 on each side of the equation. The +5, -5 changes to 0, but we know that 7x plus 0 would result in 7x. On the right side, -30 minus 5 is -35. Then, to get rid of the 7 that's in front of the x, that's 7 times x, we're simply going to divide by 7 on each side. So on the left, 7 divided by 7, that's going to cancel and turn to 1, which means it's technically 1x. But just like we set up earlier, that 1 times x, that's just going to simplify to x. So I'm actually just going to put x is equal to -35 divided by 7, that's going to give me a -5. So for our first example, you have x equals -5, and you'll have 2 questions like this on your homework. Let's go to the next example. Example number 2, solve the following equation for x, express your answer in simplest form. Please watch out for whenever it says simplest form. Typically you'll end up with a fraction or something, and the fraction needs to be simplified. So this trips up a lot of kids. Okay, so step number 1, I'm going to distribute when possible. And a dead giveaway that we can distribute is as soon as you have parentheses, you know you're going to distribute. So just like in the last problem, I'm going to distribute the number that's on the outside. That 3 will distribute to 2x to get 6x. That 3 will be distributed to 4 to give me 12. Bring down the equal, bring down the -35x, and bring down the +20. After that, I do have I like to check to combine like terms, but on the left, I have a variable and a constant, and on the right, I would like to combine, but I have a variable and constant, and we know that variables and constants don't go together. So although I look to do that, I only do it when it's possible. So backing up. So I want you to focus, I have 6x on the left and I have -35x on the right. And whenever I have variables on both sides, I always move it to the side that's larger. So 6x is larger than -35x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this -35x to the other side by adding 35x on both sides. And by moving the x terms to the larger side, this 6x plus 35, that's going to give me 41x, and that'll be a positive. If I had subtracted 6x on each side, this would be a -41x, which isn't wrong, but avoiding negatives I've just found through experience to be helpful for students. So I've got 6x plus 35x is 41. Bring down plus 12, bring down 20. 41x plus 12 equals 20. After that, I'm going to subtract 12 on each side. Cancels. And I now have 41x is equal, let's see, 20 minus 12, that's going to leave me with 8. And then to get rid of this 41 that's in front of the x, I'm going to divide by 41 on each side. 41 divided by 41 is 1, and 1 times x would simplify to x. Then 8 divided by 41, 41's a little bit harder, so I guess I would probably just look to the 8. The only way that I can reduce 8 is dividing by 2, 4, or 8. And I know that since 41 doesn't divide by 2, it's not going to divide by 4 or 8. So although I did look to simplify, the final answer for this one is going to be x equals 81 over 4, or sorry, 8 over 41. And I also want to clarify that when you get x isolated, this is an example of one solution. Example number 3. Solve the following equation for x. Express your answer in simplest form. So number 1, distribute. We do have parentheses, so I'm going to turn this into a -1. Some students find it helpful to distribute a -1 instead of just the negative sign, but it doesn't matter. -1 times 2x is -2x. -1 distributed to +1 is -1. Bring down the equal and then bring down the right side of the equation. Just bring everything else down. So now I have -2x minus 1 is equal to -2x minus 2. Again, I would like to combine, but on the left I can't combine variables and constants. And on the right side I cannot combine variables and constants. They just don't go together. So although I try to combine like terms, it's not possible here, so I'll go to step number 3, which is solve. Now, in this problem, we're kind of like example 2 if I look back. Notice that I had a variable on both sides. And what I did is I added 35x because I wanted to go ahead and make sure that my x terms were positive. So in this one, I have a -2x on the left and I have a -2x on the right. So it doesn't matter what I do. In other words, when I add 2x on the right side, I add 2x on the left side. And just for the sake of terms of trying, I'm going to pretend to try and move them to the left. -2x plus 2x cancels. On the left side, -2x plus 2x also cancels, which means when I bring down the equal sign, I'm left with a numerical statement. On the left, I have -1, and on the right, I have a -2. When you end up with a statement like this that's false, again, the key thing is to understand that -1 is not equal to -2. When it's false, you're going to go ahead and you're going to stop and you're going to write no solution. Don't just go ahead and write -1 equals -2. Tell me, what does that mean? So if you understand -1 cannot be equal to -2 because it's false, then please write no solution. And it's going to be really important that for these examples on homework that you try to isolate the variable. Notice in example 3, when I added 2x to each other, the variable disappeared. All right, let's go to our last one, example 4. Step number 1, let's distribute. So -7 gets distributed to -4, so that gives me 28x. -7 distributed to -2 is +14. And then I'm going to bring down the 28x and bring down the 14. And if they look the same, they are the same. But again, just like I said in the last example, in example 3, you have to try and isolate the variable. In example 4, I'm going to attempt to move the 28x on the right side to the left side by subtracting 28x on each side. Now, I understand they're going to cancel, so it's arbitrary whether you move left or right. Just make sure you use the properties of equality. On the left, 28x minus 28x cancels, so I bring down 14. On the right side, 28x and -28x cancels, and then I bring down 14. Now notice right here, 14 is equal to 14, and this is true. So in your attempt to isolate the variable, if the variable disappears but you're left with a true statement, then you're going to say that it's infinitely many. And I'm feeling a little bit lazy, so I'm just going to use the symbol for infinitely many. Or I think I let you put IMS to stand for infinitely many solutions. Or I guess you could write the words out. And that's it. So hopefully you found these videos helpful.